Well, the day has finally come. It's time to start removing the intake to get the ITBs ready to go on. We have everything ready for the ITBs sitting on the cart, and now it's just about getting the engine bay cleared for the ITBs to go on. I don't have too much of a game plan on how I'm gonna tackle this. I'm just gonna start removing things, and as I get into it, I'll see where I might need to go after that. The easy ones are gonna be getting out like the airflow meter, all the intake lines there, and then I'll be able to see the bolts to actually get the crab-shaped intake off. With that, I'll probably have to maybe depressurize the fuel line to then get the fuel rail out, clean it up a little bit, and then I think at that point I can't really, off the top of my head, think of too much other things that will be in the way. At that point I can start working on, you know, getting the ITBs on. You know, there's nothing left to do but to start removing parts now. So we're close, we're getting close. Okay, it didn't take me long to realize I'm gonna have to drain the coolant, relieve the pressure of the fuel system. Coolant lines, all the fuel stuff. So clearly, as I go to take off the throttle body, I'm gonna try to see if I can take off the intake with the throttle body already attached. I'll have to get rid of the throttle cable. It's gonna be a different throttle cable altogether. We need a longer one for the ITBs. So I'll go ahead and get this disconnected. I have to drain the coolant. My power steering pump has basically eaten apart my drain plug, so I'll probably just do it right out of this hose. Get everything out from these lines. Relieve the pressure of the fuel system will then allow me to kind of start playing around with everything up here and not have to worry about it. I've labeled my wires just so I know everything plugs back in. I got this big module off. Just gives me some more room to start looking in and figuring out what needs to come off next. Starting to work on the bolts that hold the intake manifold to the head. Surprisingly, they don't take too much to get loose. Just looking at them, they're a little gummed up, some more than others. I was thinking that they were gonna take a lot of force and maybe some PB blaster to break loose. Tried 2 of them and I've gotten 2 of them with a little bit of effort. So hopefully that continues for the rest of them and we can get all of the bolts off of the intake manifold. Up we go. Oh, so that's the evap tube that runs under the intake. That's now, see if I can keep that compressed down with the spring. And I think that was the last thing. So I have it off the front studs, but I would imagine it needs to come off pretty evenly. Because then as I pry it off the back studs, it kind of pushes back on the front studs. That looks like it's off everything. After using some brute force to get it off, I think I have it ready to be able to pull out. There we go. Here is my dirty engine. Somehow there's coolant still trickling out into my catch pan. So for that intake, really just being held on by 12 bolts. The bolts themselves, I think there were two or three towards the back where all the wires kind of bend over or bend around the back of the engine at the firewall. It's a little crowded back there, so those bolts were difficult to get off. The rest of the bolts came off easily. And then I was able to pull the intake off for the most part, but then I had to kind of really shove this tube down first, and I mean, it's just an O-ring on top. So once that was popped loose, and I could kind of push it behind the intake where it goes into the intake so it wasn't in the hole, that released a little bit more of the intake. I took out the bleeder screw. The fuel pressure regulator was kind of bumping up against that. Basically, taking out the bleeder screw gave me a little bit more room up front. Was able to wiggle off the front, wiggle off the back, kind of doing that kind of back and forth, wiggling the front and wiggling the back. I was able to work the intake manifold off. I'll probably want to clean this up a good bit. Get that BMW logo showing again. Cold day 2 in the garage. I think my temp's right at about 45 degrees, so I'm definitely turning on the heater here in a minute. I just want to spend a bit of today going through trying to clean up some of the crud that's everywhere in here, and just see how much cleaner it can actually get with a little bit of scrubbing. If I move through that pretty quickly, I might try to get the first part of the ITBs installed. I think for the ITBs, I'll have to, obviously the trumpets have to come off, and I think this section needs to come off. I think these are considered spacers, so I think that might need to come off, and basically this first part, the runners, if I can get everything cleaned up enough, I might start installing the runners just to see how they look, and then, you know, who knows how far I'll be able to get. Had the heater cooking for a little bit, so it got up to 55. I think in the low to mid 50s, the garage is, you know, comfortable. Wouldn't mind it being a little warmer, but definitely okay where we're at now. Made a bit of progress, just wiping down the side of the head. I think this is the build year for the head. It says 91. This was a replacement engine of a replacement engine, so it's the third engine that's been in the car. Fun to see that it's potentially a 1991 M20 B25. It is the 885 head. It's a stock M20 at this point. Cleaned it up. Still have a lot more to go, but it definitely looks better. Some areas are just hard to get, so I'm using a mixture of just Clorox wipes, shop towels, and then the Griot's heavy duty wheel cleaner, because it's just what I had on hand, and it does a really good job on the wheels, so I figured it could also get off some of the engine goop as well. But yeah, some of the tight spots, it's hard just to kind of agitate that well enough to loosen up a lot of the dirt. This area down in here is a good example of that. You can see kind of where I can really fit my hand. I get a lot, but in the smaller, tighter areas, I can't really get to it. And I haven't put too much time into it, so I think I can go back through and get that eventually. On the passenger side, some of the areas were easy to clean up. Still have a bit more to do kind of in this region. One thing I've been meaning to do for the longest time is remove the remaining kind of AC components. I've had the car 8.5 years, the AC has never worked. When I put in the 2.9 liter M20, I never even put back the condenser or a lot of the other, like the compressor and the condensers. I left in the evap tank and some of the lines, so I've just taken this time to finally get some of those out. So I'll have to cap off these two lines over here, which were the AC lines, and they kind of ran this way, and then the tank sat in that hole. And then also, I haven't had the windshield washer fluid bottle in here for the longest time, but I still left the hose in the hood, so it still kind of was behind the cover. Finally removed that as well. Here's that tank I was talking about, the lines, and then the washer hoses. So if anything, we've done a little bit of weight reduction. My pile of removed parts grows larger. I don't know, almost 4 years ago, I swapped in the Z3 steering rack. And when I did that, I used the Condor power steering, I will call it power steering delete. So that blocks off the power steering lines on the steering rack. At that point, I've always had the power steering pump in one of the lines just in the car. So I figured as I'm removing things, I might as well go ahead and get the pump out of there. Can't really see it from the top side, but I guess down in that region is where the pump was. We've opened up a little bit of room. I need that room for no purpose, but it's out of the car. It wasn't hooked up, it was just kind of there. Still had the belt on it even. So just one more thing out of the engine bay. Well, I think I've reached my limit on how much engine bay cleaning I can do for now. This side, maybe not as good. Like I was saying, it's hard to reach in between some of the spots. But I mean, it definitely looks cleaner. The head looks cleaner, the valve cover looks cleaner. Maybe someday I'll paint it, and I like when they, I like when you shave the raised portions to make those kind of polished, and then everything else like a black color. I think that always looks good. The passenger side is definitely where it looks the most noticeable that I've cleaned. So I can say I'm happy with how the cleaning went. Still not the best job, but definitely, I think, noticeably better than what it was before. So I think it's finally time to get the ITBs on. I would imagine I'll reuse the bolts and the washers that held the intake manifold on. I just want to get the crud off of those before I reuse them. I'll separate off the trumpets and the spacers just to have the, I guess, the runners go on first. Got to remove my towels, but the studs all look good. Maybe I'll give those a quick wipe down just to make sure I'm not putting on any more crud in the threads. But yeah, I don't really know anything else that I might need to prepare for this. I think it's just get it on and then slowly work through the steps of getting everything else. And then of course I'll have to measure out the lines, the vacuum lines, and make sure that's all plumbed up properly, and figure out where my coolant hoses need to go. But I think for now, getting the runners on would be a big start.